Okay, we're live and we're recording, and I'm assuming there's a lot of people. Oh, here we go. I can see all the attendees now. We're just going to wait for a few more people. We have 5 attendees in so far, and it looks like everyone else is just coming through the doors. Hope everyone can find a seat. Please remember to socially distance 6 feet apart if it's possible. If not, I hope everyone's wearing a mask. And that's it for COVID jokes. Okay. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm just going to jump right in because we only have an hour, and I'm seeing everyone's just getting set up. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It looks like we have a lot of attendees today, so hopefully we're going to have a lot of interesting Q&A, and we have 5 great panelists ready to go. So it's always odd just talking to myself. I'm going to do my best to get through this part really quickly. So first of all, thanks for joining. A bit of housekeeping just before we jump in. There is a Q&A in this session. You may see it in your panel. If you have questions that come up during the session, please by all means post it. We'll do our best to get through all of them. It's highly likely we're not going to get to all of them. And in that case, we do have a backup that we'll talk to you guys about at the end of the session. But we're here today to talk about what we're calling Talent 2.0. Technically, it's Talent 2.1 if we're doing proper version control, because we did Talent 2.0 last year as well. But this session comes out of a large number of conversations we've been having at CASO, as well as with members and various individuals within the within the community about the talent situation in Ontario. And the focus of today's conversation is not necessarily to dwell on why we're having a talent challenge, more importantly about what could we do. We call this a win-win-win. How do we all work together with our stakeholders, with our studios, with our artists and talent in order to create an even more successful animation community and animation industry? So we do have a couple of panelists here who are going to bring a lot of really interesting insights. This is part of our ongoing Creative Futures conversations that we've been running with CASO for the past year and expect to run through the whole year this year. So hopefully we get a lot of interesting dialogue. I'm going to just quickly throw out all of our panelists here to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start just in order of last names. We'll start with you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Jonathan Bronfman, co-founder, co-president at Mars. We are a tech and visual effects company.
Great. And then Sonia.
Hi, I'm Sonia Carey. I'm here as the owner and operator and founder of the Animation Lounge, which is just a series of workshops, which I call a after school and before work program, just dedicated to training and networking.
Thanks, Sonia. Tori?
Hi, I'm Tori Coulthard. I'm the SVP of production at Jamfield. And as you may know, we operate out of Toronto, Ottawa, and Halifax.
Thanks, Tori. Mark?
Hi there, I'm Mark Jones. I'm chair of the School of Creative Arts and Animation at Seneca College in Toronto.
And last but not least, Drew.
So I'm Drew Ng. I'm from House of Cool, a pre-production studio here in Toronto, and I'm the head of education, recruitment, and training.
Great. So we have a really nice cross-section today of different perspectives. I like to think of it as different people are going to touch talent along different points in the journey, as well as people who are dealing with production directly, both from a training perspective as well as from actually in studio and private and public. So hopefully we get a lot of perspectives here, and I'm sure there's going to be more people who have different perspectives that can weigh in on the Q&A. Before we jump in, some of you may have received a pre-survey from Matt Bishop from CASO, where we were just trying to gauge what kind of similarities and what kind of pain points people are experiencing in the industry. We got a fairly good response. I'm just going to read out a couple of really quick stats just to give us all an idea of what we're seeing in today's day when it comes to talent. So our first question was, has hiring become more difficult during the pandemic? And 90% of the respondents said yes, which is probably not a surprise. We asked how many job openings there are in your studio, and 10% said 55 or more, but almost 30% said 30 or more. And the vast majority was above, I'm going to say 15 or higher, which ended up taking up almost, quick math, 60 to 70% of respondents. So there's a lot of people who are hiring a high volume of jobs who are having difficulty hiring. Where are you finding your talent? The majority of responses, 50%, suggested it was international, including the US and Canada, while the rest said, 10% said in Ontario, 30% said in Canada but outside of Ontario, and 10% also said specifically the US. So almost 60% international hiring right now. Big one that really, I think, would make a lot of us second guess what's going on right now is, have you had to turn down work due to a lack of artists? 90% of respondents said yes. We also asked a lot of you if there was any solutions, and it's interesting to note a lot of those answers are similar to some of the discussions we've had in our pre-call with the panelists. So I'm going to use this as a bit of a jumping off point, just to like set the landscape for ourselves. I want to ask each of our panelists if you can just briefly talk about what you think might be some of the factors contributing to why we're facing this talent shortage today. So I'm going to start, Tori, I'm going to start with you. And maybe we can just kind of have people throw up their hands. Just a quick idea of what you think is causing where we are right now, or what are the key drivers?
I think, this is a good problem to have. If we look back 20 years ago, the industry wasn't having this type of boom. I believe the key factor is, the streamer wars, there's lots of demand for content out there. As an industry, we've proven in the last 2 years that we are pandemic proof, which is an incredible thing for us to have all accomplished sitting here today. And it's a really good problem to have, that we have so much work, but of course it has its challenges when we're having this much trouble finding people. And, I was mentioning in our prep call, for me, the barometer of, how bad is it out there is when you're seeing studios in, say, Vancouver, who are approaching Ontario artists and willing to forego tax credits on their entire production, which we know is a huge factor of, possibly their financing structure. So it means they're willing to take quite a loss to simply staff up and possibly, meet their deliverables, or they're going to be in bigger jeopardy. So that is a huge factor. And I think, we're at where we are because of the race for talent, the race for content on screen.
I'll throw to Jonathan just to get your perspective as well as a studio owner.
Yeah, just picking up on what Tori said, which I fully agree with. I think, as Tori alluded to, 20 years ago, the industry wasn't necessarily booming. Today it is. But I believe what happened in that period of time is we exported so much talent out of Ontario, and now it's incumbent on us to try to pull them back in. And I'd say also conversely, even today, talent is being pulled out of Ontario by other studios offering better rates and more security in the employment. The reasons for that, I think we could talk a lot about. I have my own ideas, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Drew, I'm going to go to you next, just because you are in studio, so you're touching production as well as training. So kind of curious to get your view on things.
Sure. I agree with both Jonathan and Tori, but a little bit outside as well. So when I joined the industry in '94, it was basically a golden age of animation, basically the reset after Disney had come out with so many of their great films. And from my experience, a lot of the studios were desperate for hire as well. And we were being hired sight unseen from schools. And I think we're in that stage right now because of the streaming wars and because of talent is now international. And I think we're now at the point where we're in that same cycle and we're just going through it again. And a lot of us have just never been through that point. So we're trying to figure out how to get through it now.
Thanks, Drew. Sonia, you also occupy a very kind of curious space when it comes to perspective here in our industry. You're in studio at Industrial Brothers, as well as operating your own training. Kind of curious, what does it look like for you when it comes to talent?
Just for my own purposes, I I look at the fact that we still get, and I do get a lot of people coming to me. There's a huge group of talent who are here in Ontario who we do end up turning away for certain reasons. Maybe they just don't have anything on their CV. Maybe they just are coming out of a strange situation where they've been working at Tim Hortons for a while and it just doesn't look like they're heading in the right industry, the right path. So I try to focus on those and try to rebuild just from that talent pool. And it was a philosophy I used. I was a head of studio a few years back, and we had a project where we landed a second one. We needed about 75 people. And instead of turning them away, I just got dedicated to training on the floor. So sitting side by side with people who really just would not have been picked up by anybody else. So I built my own separate pool, but you really have to be dedicated to them around, the clock training and teaching them everything from the ground up. And now those people are thriving in other studios, which is amazing. So I just focus on that, like the people who are getting turned away, turned down, amazing talents, and just building that and providing hopefully a few people for everybody in Toronto.
That's cool. And I'm going to come back to that as well later on. Mark, you also bring a very different perspective because you were working in training, and in education. What does it look like from a college and educational perspective right now when we look at talent within Ontario, as well as maybe broader than that?
Well, from a talent perspective, I think we can say off the bat that there's no shortage of demand. We actually have a lot of people applying to programs right across the entire Ontario college system. You asked, what could we do better to actually help address some of the pain points that exist in animation and VFX right now? My answer would be we need better coordination between all of the channels within the workforce development ecosystem. And the reason I say that is because we know that young people coming out of high school, for example, are very interested in animation. We sometimes have to let them know that that also can pivot into a career in visual effects, for example. But at the high school level, there's still, I think, a little bit of a stigma that they don't see careers in culture as being viable careers, and therefore they're being positioned a little bit differently than other careers across the various economic sectors. That actually has a direct effect on the number of people applying to our programs who want kind of formal education. But even if you actually factored that in, we know from a survey that we did across the college sector a few years ago that there are actually far more people applying to our programs than we can actually accommodate. So that's where we need coordination between the post-secondary sector and government and business, because what we really need is a kind of opening of the channels to actually enable a certain amount of sustained growth while there is still this kind of peak demand in jobs. So that would be my approach, at least at this point. We can talk a little bit more about that further on.
I'm gonna bucket our conversation into three kind of large categories and see if we can keep them all contained. Imagine they bleed into themselves. The first I'm calling economic and policies. So what are the economics? What are the policies? And how do we start looking at twisting some of the dials and pulling some of the levers in order to address some of the issues? Jonathan, I'm going to start with you because you had mentioned just now, but also in our earlier conversations, talent drain from historically losing talent to other jurisdictions, the challenge of talent attraction, price points, and competitiveness. How are we able to compete on salaries as well as on how that kind of factors into our project budgets and all the other kind of larger pieces. What do you think needs to change, or what are some things that you think are challenges that we need to overcome in order to address some of those issues?
Yeah, I think the primary challenge is the level of show that's being dropped in Ontario. And I will say, with everything I'm about to say, I do believe we're moving in the right direction and we're pointed in the right direction. I just think we've lagged behind some other regions of the world that were ahead of us. Historically, and take this with a grain of salt, but historically, large Hollywood blockbuster productions that are shooting in Ontario would not leave behind their visual effects work. They'd leave parts, odds and sods. But if you look back, when one was Pacific Rim shot, whenever that show was shot, just as to cherry pick or a Total Recall back in the day, the majority of that work was not left in Ontario. And more recently, you're starting to see bigger chunks of work being left in the territory, but it hasn't been the norm. And what that does, what high level shows does is it allows the studio to improve, they become more reliable, their creative bar gets higher. And so it comes down to really a pricing thing from a studio perspective. What's going to allow us to increase our pricing so that we could be more aggressive in our hiring process? So, you look at an ILM or a Weta, for example, these guys charge way more than anyone over here. But what are the clients paying for? They're paying for certainty in the creative, certainty in the delivery and timeline, and a certain confidence in the pricing and the pricing not being volatile. So clients are willing to pay a premium for those pieces of certainty. But to date, I don't think Ontario vendors have been able to provide it at that level. Again, we're improving a lot. Our trajectory is really steep, but we're not quite where the ILMs, or if you look toward the UK, we're just not where those guys are yet.
I'm going to flip to Tori in a second, but I do have a question for you around certainty and stability. What needs to happen in order to start guaranteeing that sort of option for clients? What's missing right now that's preventing that from being the case here? And what do you think?
I don't think it's missing. I just think we've lagged behind. And something we point to a lot in our shop is what they did in London, and the way the shops in London all came together. They developed a network. And so you go to London and you walk down the street and there's like, oh, here's a 1,000-person shop over here. There's a 1,000-person shop over there. In Toronto, there's not a single shop, I think, that's over 500 people. So we're just not where they are, and I think we're getting there. Like we're working on a few shows, but there's one particular show which shall remain nameless for the time being, but it's with a big Hollywood studio, very valuable IP, and they actually brought together 4 Ontario vendors to service the whole show. And I'd like to see more of that, and watching the way that we work across the vendors and providing a seamless approach, but also client facing. They don't feel like they're working across 4 different vendors. They're working with one team to execute their whole show. I think that's a really critical part. And I don't know what's happened because, Mars is a fairly young company, but it's my belief that studios helping each other succeed will allow everyone to grow and allow us to pull better and better work into the province.
Tori, you're also kind of close to this, being in production yourself and within the studio. How much of that resonates with you in terms of what Jonathan's talking about? And is there anything else that kind of adds to that equation for you?
Yeah, I think, the animation side does differ a little bit in VFX, but I think there are definitely some similarities in terms of, reaching the stronger the content, the more premium content we can all be getting, will obviously naturally, there's a premium that will come with that. If you're looking at features, higher quality content should have bigger budgets. And I do think the economic factors are a really big part of this discussion. When you look, it ties back into the tax credit model as well. With all artists working from home, it's amazing for the artists right now, and they have more options because studios are willing to hire them out of province. So it does put a strain. So I feel like the tax credit model is naturally being strained based on what's happening in other provinces within the country. And of course, there's more demand for a talent. The prices are going up. So I think the economic factor, it's a really important part of this discussion. And it's a challenge. And I do think it would be challenging if you had one show in the studio as well. The smaller the studio, the more challenging it's going to be. So yeah, I think I agree with Jonathan with, as an industry, we're striving for higher and higher quality, and we are getting there. And as we do that, it naturally does help make us more of a destination as a province.
If I could piggyback on Tori just for one moment.
Please.
To your point, Tori, about foregoing tax credits, we're doing that at Mars. We don't feel like there's enough talent in Ontario for us to service the premium content that we want to service. So our view is we're going to forego the incremental 10% that you're going to get on a person's salary for a higher level of talent so that we can continue to pull the best work into the province.
Let's talk about tax credits in a moment, because I know everyone's just chomping at the bit for that. I'm curious about the pandemic and how it's affected. We did a conversation last year on the Studio 2.0 and how a lot of studios, first of all, had to rapidly go off into distributed mode. and how they manage that, and then also where people start finding the balance, which seemed to largely lie in hybridization. So some work from studio, some work from home, some studios going completely virtual. I'm curious about the impacts that's had on bottom lines, because I'd have to speculate that if a more virtualized studio would lower overheads in terms of physical space, some infrastructure costs, I'm sure they're offset in other places. Does that create opportunities for greater salaries? Or is that really incremental and nominal for you guys? I'm just curious about, does changing the studio model itself have any net impact? And maybe I can also, Drew, and Sonia for that matter, you're both in this mix doing that yourselves. Kind of curious to get your thoughts.
I think it's just a matter of us knowing now where we are and where we're headed. And I think building budgets and preparing budgets for COVID, factoring in no studios and working from home, and definitely the competitive salaries that we're trying to course correct now halfway through productions. That's also leading to the flight of the artists because they're chasing the dollars at this point. And I think just collaborating, I think studio wise and finding some sort of normal range of salary is going to be really important, because the competitive, is really working and people are not sticking around. So I'm also focusing on longevity in my classes, teaching artists that, working on something from beginning to end is very important. And just because you get a better offer or, something better, it doesn't mean that's going to lead to longevity over there. You might get 2 months of a great salary here and then another 3 with an even better. I said that's just going to work against you in the long run. You need to see a project through, and then people will have such confidence in you that you're not going to be a flight risk, because it's so expensive to keep hiring and training. And, we're watching a lot of dollars fly out the window just for retraining, the resources put into recruiting, and then they stick around for a couple of months. So I think that's just going to come with our new world that we live in. But focusing on especially the young people that I'm working with in my workshops, working on something to the end is so very important, and the money will always keep coming after that. So I hope it's working.
Drew, I'm curious if you want to piggyback off of that. I do have a follow-up question, but I want to give you a moment there.
Sure. I'm not as heavily involved in budgets and finances for the studio, but I haven't seen much of a change in the costs. The cost to run a studio. I mean, we're still paying the rent. We're still paying the software. We actually probably have to pay more to figure out new ways to work in hybrid. So for me, it's actually getting more expensive to work in a hybrid situation. Salaries are going up. We did a salary research project last year, and if anything, it's out of date even a year later. So I don't think hybridization has actually saved us any money at all.
And I'm seeing Jonathan and Tori nodding their heads as well. I get a sense that's the same for all of you.
I was just going to say that, Sonia, everything you just said, I'm like, from your mouth to God's ears. And I completely agree with Drew. And I'd add, Drew, to everything you just said. It's also like, you have a quick question for an artist. Well, then, you're sending a Slack, then you're sending a calendar invite, then you're getting on a call and you're looking at it versus popping over to someone's desk. So there's a built-in inefficiency in that process.
Interesting.
And I would add that, we want to, as we all want to work from home very securely as well. There are infrastructure costs to get everyone working very smoothly and securely from home, from large hardware purchases and things like that. So I'm not seeing a lot of savings in that area. I'm not seeing any.
I mean, the last thing we want to be doing as an industry is chasing the dollar down to the bottom in order to save money so we can keep bidding lower. It sounds like the real hope here is you got to keep building the industry up so that you can get higher budgets, better opportunities, and kind of spread that around more ably. Mark, I'm just going to throw to you just in case. Do you have anything you want to add to this from your perspective, or any thoughts?
Well, just to say that hybridization is it's an issue that I think everyone is wrestling with right now, because the thing is, certainly within the college and university sector, like just like everyone else, we had to pivot online when the pandemic hit. And the question that, a lot of us are kind of wrestling with right now is, well, as things open up, what's industry doing? Like, what's the sector doing? Because obviously the way that we actually operate our classes also needs to reflect the conditions that the graduates are going to be moving into after they move into the sector. And so if the sector stays online, then we actually need to now integrate that perhaps more permanently as a factor for how we actually teach students. But it actually underscores a lot of the same conditions that a lot of people are finding, which is that it may seem great to work from home. It's very convenient in some respects, but like trying to get teamwork going and actually trying to get groups to actually emulate the kind of dynamic that you would have by having them in a studio together to work collaboratively, that's a real challenge. There are some pretty interesting technological solutions out there for that. But this again is why we need so much, we need a lot of coordination between what the industry is doing and how that actually informs the way post-secondary needs to operate in order to prepare for those ranges of approaches that we know is going to be happening company by company, because not every company is going to be dealing with this the same way.
I'm going to keep on this for one more question, then we'll move over to tax credits, because I know that's also a key kind of component of all this. When we think about salary, there's a really great book by an author named Daniel Pink called Drive that talks about what motivates employees and people to participate in business. And of course, if we think about Maslow's hierarchy, it's got its own kind of version of this. But the point of the book effectively says salary is generally table stakes, right? Once you've solved salary, you still have many other ways to create value and meaning for employees and talent within your organization. I'm curious, in the short term, if there's anyone here doing anything beyond salaries to attract and retain talent that might augment the opportunities, simply because if you've got someone in New Zealand dangling a $200,000 a year salary and you can't get up there, are there other mechanisms that you're finding are successful or that you would want to try leaning into further in order to authentically retain talent in your studio or in the region? And I'll just throw that to anyone.
I'd like to chime in a little bit. Just here at House of Cool, we've been doing internal training mainly for story artists for a long time, but it's been very informal. So now we're at the point where we're trying to formalize it a little bit more. We're doing a lot of internal training, but also external training with, we run our own storyboard workshop for students and artists in the, just out in the industry. So we're trying to figure out ways to formalize our training programs a bit more to attract and retain people when they come to House of Cool, that they know that they're going to be continuously upskilled as they're going, rather than just a pit stop for a project and then find the next one. We want to let them know that they can almost call this place home for a while, right?
There's a culture,
Yes.
culture and a deeper meaning. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Sonia, I'm sure you're close to it, or Tori.
I'm happy to jump in. I think it's a great point. It's really salary isn't the only factor of why people want to stay at a job. I think it's building a studio that people want to work at, offering, I do think all the time, if you were to switch jobs in the middle of the pandemic, what would be the, you're sitting in your living room, wherever you work out of, what's the difference between your last day of work at the last job and the first day of work at your new job? And I think it's still, it's a challenge for all of us, is still building on the company culture and how you can do that from a work and home environment. But I think it's, offering to what Drew's saying is a growth within a company. How can you grow? Is there a career path for you here? Job security is a big one. And I think it's connection and making people feel a part of something, helping people feel a part of something. And actually, I guess back to Sonia's point with when you're trying to keep people on a show, I think it's, they're not only jumping around for salary, I think they're jumping around of the quality of work. It's a job that interests them. It's going to feel meaning. It might be a really hard show, but often when we have a hard show in the studio, at the end of the day, the artist's like, that was the best work I've ever done. I'm so proud of what I've just worked on. And that, I think that matters a lot as well.
Jonathan or Sonia, do you want to add anything to that, or should we move on to tax credits?
No, I will say it is definitely more than money. A lot of times we're definitely learning that building some sort of bond through the computer is new, but it's now that we recognize it, a lot of mentorships and one-on-ones and team building opportunities just to get that in-studio bond that we used to have, which also leads to you just wanting to stay because you feel like you're part of a bigger thing, you know, a part of a really big supportive team. So that's something that we're definitely focused on lately in studio and also in workshops, is how to feel like you're a part of a bigger thing than just like a tiny person in your bedroom all alone, but you're, you know, so that's new. We're working on that for sure. It's at the top of the list where we are.
Okay, I'm going to shift.
I was going to say super quick, I couldn't agree more with the line of questioning and also the responses from the co-panelists here. I think it's spot on. One thing I would add from a training perspective is it's more difficult to train in a remote setting. So we do have weekly standing training programs across different departments. But again, similar to my point about artist notes and having to get on a phone, it's not the same as being able to a senior being able to pop over to a junior's desk in the studio and just say, hey, look at this. And it takes 30 seconds.
We can keep going on this. I'm going to keep switching around now because we have a whole 2 other sections I have to get through. But I do want to talk about tax credits because I know this plays a factor in if there is not enough people currently in our jurisdiction, we draw people in. There are obviously impacts then because tax credits play such a key role have played such a key role. I know, Jonathan, you basically said, you know, they're not worth it. We're just going to kind of go past it. Tori, I'm going to start with you because you did bring it up. I'm curious to know, you know, the current challenges as well as maybe some ideas around what needs to change in order for the tax credit system to continue to be successful in supporting the studio and the industries.
Yeah, I know there are probably people attending this call right now who are far more tax credit experts than I am. I just want to say that. I also wanted to say, I believe, and I'm not 100% on this, I think there is a difference between the VFX tax credit model and the animation. I'm not sure about that, but I think it's a little different. I must say, I don't know what needs to change. I don't know the answer. I know that, and I don't know, I think this is a larger discussion. However, I guess my only point when I brought it up earlier is that if this is something that as studios in Ontario, we're going to continue to factor into our financing structure, and we're really, and you know, people are outside of our province are pulling as many people as they're hiring hundreds or 1,000 people and foregoing tax credits. It's something, you know, it might be a risk we have to think about as well. I don't know what the solution is though. Sorry if I don't have a better answer.
It's okay. I'll throw it to the rest of you for a moment just to see if anyone else wants to kick it a can. Otherwise, we'll put a pin in it and make a whole webinar about tax credits.
I could go on for like 3 hours. I'm quite passionate about tax credits, but I'm going to try to keep it super, super simple. There are
Sure.
a few things that we can do. The first, and I know there's not consensus in CASO across this, but the OK's credit, which is the animation credit, is realized by the studio, the actual vendor. So when we spend money, only we can receive that tax credit. That tax credit should not come to us. It should go straight to the producer, just like they do in Vancouver. It makes no sense for the studios to take it. It's a drag on cash and it doesn't make any sense. The second piece is the cap on labor as compared to spend. So in Ontario, specifically for the animation credit, you're only allowed to claim the 18% labor credit on 60% cap of labor. Whereas in Quebec, and this is I got after Canada Film Capital, and we had, you know, David Carter, one of the greatest tax credit minds in the country. He's very well aware of this. We had a discussion about it, and in Quebec, Quebec's the only province in the country where the provincial government audits the provincial portion of the tax credit, and the CRA audits the federal portion. In Ontario, the CRA audits the provincial portion on behalf of the provincial government. So in Quebec, they're effectively going and saying, we're not going to take a cap on labor. We're going to spend up to 100% labor and get our tax credit on it. But in Ontario, we're still capped at 60%, which again makes no sense because the whole impetus for the tax credits is there's a trickle down economics. So why should the labor be capped if we're spending on labor? I'll stop there, but I could go on. I promise.
I will add one last piece in here, and this may or may not tie into our next conversation topic, which is training. But I'm just curious about, as we talk about drawing in people from outside of Canada, knowing that we want to keep, supporting our artists here, which is really going to be, I think, the backbone of our training conversation. As you draw people in, it seems like there's factors that also play into the ability to attract foreign talent, if it comes from any other jurisdiction, in order to capitalize on the tax credits. Am I accurate in saying like there's a year grace period? This kind of creates its own friction where you're not really incentivized to bring people in, and is that good or bad?
Yeah, it's my understanding.
Mark.
Oh, sorry, Mark can jump in there.
Mark has a.
I think this sort of answers your question, but I wanted to take a step back for a second on the question of tax credits, because the thing about tax credits is why do we have tax credits? They're there because they're an incentive to stimulate business activity within a region, right? Can we say they are successful? By and large, yes, right? They are partially responsible for the influx in investment from outside Ontario that has led to the kind of situation that we have today. We can certainly talk about the comparisons between one province and another, but by and large, I think most people acknowledge that the tax credit system benefits the industry. But here's the problem: we've hit a wall with this. We're now, as we're seeing here in this panel, we have studios who are actually not taking advantage of these tax credits because they don't qualify, because there's not enough labor within the province to actually satisfy those requirements. So where do you go next? Well, you look outside the province or you look internationally. But what I want to suggest is that from a potential domestic workforce standpoint, we actually have more potential talent that we're not actually moving through the system because of the fact that there are many more people wanting to get into programs and supports that the current formal post-secondary system can actually accommodate. So if you want to talk about investment, then maybe we should actually open this up to what are the other parts of the ecosystem that need other forms of investment in order to increase the amount of talent domestically that then industry actually can take advantage of, and therefore also take advantage of the tax credits. Because I think part of the challenge with working with governments is that they tend to work within their own portfolios. They don't necessarily work across portfolios. But when you're talking about workforce development, you really need to think of it as an entire system. So, more investment within post-secondary to actually increase our capacity to move through more young talent through programs like ours can actually increase the pool that you draw from. But until we can actually have that conversation, it's very difficult to get there. Right now, the college system is the least funded college system within Canada from a government grant standpoint. So, there's obviously other aspects of this that I think feed into this context of tax credit.
That was the best segue from tax credits to education I could possibly hope for. Jonathan, go ahead. I just wanted to make a note.
And I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but just in response to Mark, first, one of the things I'm pointing to in a roundabout way is it's not equal tax credit opportunity across provinces. So that's why I'm saying BC, well, they're sending their credits to the producer. That's an advantage for BC. In Quebec, they're not capped on the labor as a percentage of spend. That's an advantage in Quebec. It's probably why you see way bigger studios in both of those provinces. The second piece is and I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but we're taking advantage where we see we can. If the labor is capped at 60%, but I'm spending 70% labor on a given show, well, I'm just going to take that 10%. I'm just going to try to get the best person possible because they're not tax credit eligible anyway. And then I would also add that, even if I go down to 55% labor in Ontario as a percentage of spend, that incremental 5% is, this is a rhetorical question, but is it really worth it for me to keep those credits eligible, but sacrifice on the talent? It's a loaded question.
And if I'm understanding, Mark, where you're coming from, and I actually want to ask you a bit of a follow-up to that, lead in you gave us. The challenge here we're facing right now is fundamentally a lack of talent in our current jurisdiction. So studios are driven to going into other jurisdictions to find people. So what we want to start thinking about then is how do we start filling our industry with more quality talent? So at least as a component of this. So the question ends up being, what have the colleges identified? I know you mentioned HOMAD. Maybe you can explain HOMAD really quickly to the participants here today. What have you guys identified? And what are some opportunities that you guys see might be possible? I know you're talking about government funding and being underfunded. And I think that's historically been the case for 20 years in the college system, maybe 40. So what other pieces are you guys noticing? What are you seeing? What are opportunities that colleges are trying to capitalize on that studios might want to be aware of? And maybe you can fold into that just talking about coordination. So this seems to be a big part of what you were talking earlier.
Sure. So HOMAD, HOMAD, is an organization called the Heads of Media Arts and Design. It's basically every chair, associate dean, and dean of media arts and design programs at the college level from across Ontario. We meet 3 times a year minimum, and we're in constant contact with each other. We are actually required by legislation to do this through our frameworks, but we do it anyway because we all really like each other, and we actually like to coordinate among each other and find out how everybody else is doing. So about 3 years ago, we decided to do a survey working with an organization called the Strategen Group that actually tried to capture what was our collective capacity for our programs in terms of the workforce that we were developing and graduating, and how are we actually preparing for what we knew was going to be this giant tidal wave of growth that was going to be hitting Ontario as a result of the investment that we knew was coming in and that was being widely published. So what we found essentially is that across our 22 colleges, we actually have roughly 20,000 students within our various programs, and we have 280 programs across the province. I'm not just talking animation and visual effects here, but it's everything. It's performance, it's design, it's everything within the culture sector. We graduate a little over 9,000 people a year, but the number that really struck us was we asked the question, if based on the number of quality applications that we're getting right now, how many more students could we actually take in our programs if we did not have capacity issues? And when we added the answers from the individual colleges in that question, it came to over 5,000 people. 5,000 people is roughly the equivalent of adding another Algonquin College and another George Brown College within the media art and design cluster into the system. So the question becomes, well, if there is enough worthwhile, if there's enough strong applications in the system that actually would allow us to grow to that level, well, how come we can't do it? And it's a multifold issue. It's capacity, it's investment, it's policy, it's local conditions within each region, because not every region is exactly the same. But this is why I come back to the ecosystem question, because in order for us to start mining more of that demand, in order to satisfy industry's need for greater amount of talent that the system is actually able to move through, then we can't have that conversation alone. It really needs to be a conversation that exists within the high schools, within all post-secondaries, within programs like Sonia's, which are so vital to the ecosystem, and also within industry. So I know it's a very kind of typical industry association angle to take, which is to say we need greater coordination. But I really think this problem is solvable, or at least it's more solvable than we think it is, that we actually need much more dialogue in order to get there. So hope that helps.
Yeah, I want to just throw this back to the other 4 panelists who are in studio, and then we'll kind of peek under the hood around some of the in-house training. But I'm curious about how all the studios are currently coordinating with post-secondary, whether it's colleges or universities, both in and outside of Ontario, just to get a sense of what does it look like for you? Do you guys coordinate with colleges, or is it something that you kind of only do at recruiting day? Anyone feel free to jump in.
I'll start with that one. So we're talking to colleges, but really it is only an industry day to look for interns and to maybe spark some imagination to join our department of storyboards, which is what we're looking for. We're trying to have them get excited about that. So I think we are looking to be more involved with the colleges, more on a day-to-day. We have to understand that sometimes studios maybe might complain about the talent that is coming out of college. And if that's the case, then we have to be able to provide the resources and the teachers to help them get the students up to the level that we are expecting, right? We can't just say, this is what we want, but we're not going to help you do it. And we want to be able to get in there and get our hands dirty, but we have to figure out how to do that in production schedules and budgets as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sonia, Jonathan, Tori, anything else? What are you guys doing when it comes to coordinating with the colleges or education in general?
I can jump in. You know, we're working really closely. In many cases, some of our employees are professors at these colleges, which is a really incredible connection to have. They're working, you know, I think that's always great when the professors are working and close to the industry. And I personally sit on the board at Algonquin, so I'm very much in contact with them. And I do think, you know, in the last, I look back again, I'm just thinking of 10 years because I remember 10 years ago having deja vu of a similar conversation of there's not enough Toon Boom animators out there. And, you know, the colleges, I think, rose to the occasion. And, you know, there was at the time a bit of a shift going on, more Toon Boom productions moving in the province. And we're seeing, you know, incredible talent coming out of the schools. And I do think there's a bit of a balance at the studio. You know, it's an investment that we're all wanting to make, hiring more students, and then having the balance internally. Can we support them? Can we mentor them? You couldn't possibly staff a show with 100% students. It wouldn't be right for them or the show. It's making sure we have that internal support as well for them once they're in the studio.
Mark, I'm curious, I'm going to leapfrog Jonathan and Sonia here really quick, just because we have a few more topics I want to cover. Do you have any advice on how studios and industry could greater participate and coordinate with post-secondary? And even, you know, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to kind of acknowledge some of the questions coming through the QA around high schools, which you had mentioned, because of course that feeds into what you guys are managing on your end. What can the industry do more of? Are there areas that aren't being really done? You mentioned dialogue. What else? Is there advice that we can start maybe using these kind of forums as to start motivating some sort of action for everyone that we can see the net change?
Yeah, Tori gave a great example of, you know, Tori sits on the advisory board of Algonquin. That's a terrific example. Every college program across the province is mandated to have an industry advisory committee. So get in touch with whatever your local college or colleges are. Ask, are there spaces available on your advisory committee? We'd love to have someone from our studio actually sit on it to advise on curriculum and what our needs are. So that's one thing to do right away. Another one is to get in touch with the colleges to find out about what are their recruitment activities that actually exist to support studios. Sometimes it's industry days, sometimes it's recruitment presentations. Every college, every university, every entity that actually wants to graduate good students in these areas crave that industry connection. All you really have to, and it would be, you know, we're all very busy. It would be great if we actually were able to do that on a more regular basis. But it is really helpful to know when someone from a studio picks up the phone or drops an email to a program coordinator or a chair or a dean and say, how can we help? Because it's that level of coordination. And I would actually extend that we actually could use that also on the high school side as well. I think we need to start opening up that there are maybe key high school teachers or people in the school boards that should be sitting on those committees as well, because again, that's how we get to the broader conversation on how we can approach this.
I'm going to switch gears. There's a lot more conversation that can happen there. I do want to talk about in-house training. You know, there's a bit of someone, I think, Tori, you may have mentioned the balance and the investment. So Drew and Sonia, you know, Sonia, you're doing out-of-house training, if I'm not mistaken. You're not actually, but you have done in-house. But I'll start, Drew, very quickly with you. You know, you guys at House of Cool, maybe can you quickly describe what you guys have started doing? Because I know you guys have put some formalization around how you train, and talk about some of the, you know, the challenges, sure, but also the interesting opportunities. How have you guys found the balance when it comes to, we're paying someone for production, we need them to be doing production hours, but we need to train them?
Sure. So CASO Cool, we've been doing what we call lunch and learns once a month for about an hour over lunch. So we get some pizza, we have everybody in a room, and we pick a topic to talk about. It can be anything professional development or even personal development. So we'll talk about storyboards, a specific subject, or one of my passions is, retirement finances. Talk to the artists about RSPs and TFSAs and tell them, we want you to be able to retire one day. So we do these 1 hour sessions once a month over lunch, and anybody is able to teach these lessons, anything that they're passionate about. And we'll go right from basics for storyboards, how to break down a script. So very simple, and then all the way up to more advanced visual language skills. And it's just sharing information. Part of our DNA is that we want people here who are willing to share their information.
Sonia, really quickly, because you also have hands-on experience, and Jonathan, Tori, I'm also curious if you guys offer in-house training, and if so, maybe how you found balance or challenges. But Sonia, what's your experience like, and how are you seeing opportunities to create that balance? Does it all have to be off hours?
Definitely supporting, I'm dedicated to anybody who wants to work with me and move along. So I try to keep it to off hours and weekends, and we jump in and just learn like the language of the animation community, some software, and also we are working through my sponsorship. We have a pretty heavy presence in some high schools and even younger than that, just software classes, training, and getting them ready to be accepted by colleges and universities. And also I'm working with quite a few US groups. I have a group from Compton right now who want to learn what it's like to move to Ontario, to relocate, to enjoy the animation industry here. So there's like some, contracts and immigration and software and animation all rolled into one, and have been really successful. And it's not huge, but five people at a time entering Ontario, joining the animation industry. So dedicated.
5 more people with jobs.
A lot of work, but I'm dedicated to that, and mentorship, especially for young Black women. I have a huge following who just don't feel like they've been heard or given opportunities, and I'm having a really great success rate there as well. So just really mentorship and sponsorship, really effective.
I want to talk more about this. We only have 7 minutes left. I guarantee you we're not going to get to the QA. I want to talk very quickly about technology because Jonathan and Mark and a few of you guys have talked about it. But there's definitely some follow-up questions I think we're going to want to ask around. Are there communities that are simply not getting access into this industry that we could be trying to find and create more avenues, more channels, more opportunity? And I'm not sure, Sonia, if you're kind of touching on that with when you're talking about the group from Compton, the young Black women who want to have a chance to get in who aren't really seeing it there. Would you agree that there's pockets of communities out there that we're just blind to, or we should be starting to focus on as another source of people who would want work and do great work that we just don't have the avenues for?
For sure. I think that just based on the graduates, you mentioned the number of graduates coming out of colleges, and I do get, to see a lot of young Black, particularly women, are very interested in connecting with me, but men as well who do graduate and they just kind of go somewhere else. They don't really remain in this industry. They aren't getting hired for certain reasons. So I'm just trying to teach them how to not give up, how to, not kind of feel insecure and work, because you can only come, with, if you have the experience and you're better than everyone, somebody will hire you. So just teaching them how to be stronger, giving them that opportunity. But there is definitely a group that we need to focus on and help a little bit more.
I'm going to shift gears very quickly. I don't think we're going to give it enough time. So I think this is actually, I hope, another session altogether, which is talking about technology and production and how that also creates a net effect in terms of addressing the talent shortage. Jonathan, maybe it can just be you at this point, unless we have a bit of time. Can you just talk briefly about what you'd mentioned in our earlier call around things like artificial intelligence and where technologies are augmenting your workforce?
Yeah,
or where you see it
totally.
going?
Yeah, just if I could pick up on Sonia for a second, Sonia, you know what?
Sure.
I was literally just talking about this tomorrow. And we say at Mars, it's a meritocracy. So if you're really good at what you do, nobody cares what you look like, you're going to grow and you're going to get put in the position. And I think that's reflected in a lot of our most senior executives at our company. We have women of color. So we're all about it. But I do think, to your point, there's a system for us as a company, it's systemic prior to arriving at Mars. So what are those systemic issues along the way that aren't merit-based, that funnel, a filtered group of people into Mars, at which point we do believe it's a meritocracy. So, I agree with you. Something that we're doing, and this dovetails with training, is we're working on artificial intelligence. So the idea here for artificial intelligence is it lends itself to our company goals. And our company goals are to solve the global shortage in visual effects capacity. And now I'm not saying we're going to do it alone, but this is our little effort to make a dent in it. And the idea is that there aren't enough artists. We all know that, but the demand way outstrips the supply of vendors. So artificial intelligence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to put jetpacks on artists. So, and I'm not talking about 1, 2, 3x, I'm talking orders of magnitude. So where an artist could actually be outputting 20 times or 30 times what a traditional pipeline or a traditional artist would be able to offer. And this dovetails with talent and growing talent, in that a lot of what we're doing, and I'm not allowed to talk exactly about the artificial intelligence we're developing, although it's probably the worst kept secret in the business, but the stuff we're doing is not the most sophisticated work. And that's a good thing for people coming out of these programs, because you can't just jump into senior level work. You gotta grow. And so if you can start with what we're doing in our artificial intelligence division, and instead of painting 100 frames, you get to paint 2 or 3 frames, and our artificial intelligence extrapolates those frames over the remaining frames. And for us, it's a great way to bring juniors, bring college kids in, test them in that arena, allow them to succeed, or at least put them in a position to succeed in that arena, so that they could grow and expand on their expertise and their pedigree.
We're literally don't have enough time. My last question would be, because I see Tori's about to maybe say something. I just saw you open your mouth. I'm looking at body language. Is technology playing a role in anyone else's workforce in terms of how you're able to manage the gaps in talent? Tori, if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Mine is a little bit connecting, I guess, the college, piece and the artificial intelligence. So this is maybe a statement moving away from artificial intelligence. One thing I don't think we chatted about, some of the trends in the industry. I'm sure some of the people joining this call are seeing it. There's a huge trend towards more traditional. I've heard the term tradigital, that's why digital, whatever that means. But obviously including much more hand-drawn animation. And I think that's another area that we could be working more closely with the colleges. If you look at our animators in the industry who've been animating digitally for the past 15 plus years, they're a little less removed from hand-drawn animation than maybe some of the students coming out. So we could, I think, be working really closely together. And I guess that's further away from artificial intelligence, but I do think it's a exciting piece that we can be really working closely with the colleges on as people continue to build out those pipelines, which is exciting.
That is great. And I feel like there's just a whole wealth of things we haven't had a chance to talk about today. So I am going to put a pin in our conversation because we have 1 minute left, and I know people have to get back to probably work. But first, I want to thank all the panelists for your time today. I feel like we've just kind of skipped a stone across a very large pond in terms of what's happening and what we can be doing. So hopefully the conversation continues. And I would invite all the people who've asked questions. We're going to take these questions, capture them, and try to find a format that we can answer them so that people can see some responses, because sometimes there's really great little questions in here that really do deserve a bit of a thought. I noticed that Drew managed to answer one midstream. Congratulations, Drew. As well, we would offer to anyone who has participated today to participate in our post-event survey where we will ask you follow-up questions. Are there things that you wanted to talk about that weren't addressed, or do you have any other follow-up questions? Do you want to hear about other topics? So please, if you do see that survey, we would really love to hear what else you feel would be valuable to have a group such as this talk about during our next session, and perhaps even ideas for other sessions that you would like to see. Because I know, Tori, you're talking about industry trends. There's a whole other wealth of conversations that we could be having that aren't focused solely on talent. And outside of that, I just want to make a couple quick thank yous again to the panel, to Ann Denemy for helping set this thing up and get us running, and to the team at CASO. If you're not familiar with CASO, if you're not a member, please sign up for the newsletter. We're really trying to start spreading some of the good word here of what's going on. CASO as an organization has been working hard behind the scenes to work with industry stakeholders to affect policy change and help promote studios in Ontario across the world. It's a lot of work, and the people who are taking part really are passionate about helping CSL succeed. So if you feel like you have a place there, by all means, reach out. We're very easy to get a hold of. And otherwise, I think we're all done for today. Good luck, everyone, with whatever's going on in your home and or your business. And let us know if you solve the talent problem with a direct email so we can send it to everyone else. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
So yeah, I don't know how to end these things, so I'm just going to hit end. Or stop recording or something.